Heyo, what's up and welcome. I'm the one and only West Coast King, and welcome back to Major League 90, where we are talking Major League Soccer, and today we're wrapping up our 2018 preseason predictions with the Western Conference. And before we get into these rankings, let me just say the Western Conference is way more difficult, in my opinion, to predict than the Eastern Conference this season. In the East, there are quite a few clear-cut contenders, teams that you know without a doubt are going to be very, very good this season and are going to be there when the playoffs roll around. In the West, I have no idea. Honestly, I don't know. I don't think that there's even one team that I would say is an absolute, you look at them and go, yeah, that's a contender right there. That team is going to be there when the playoffs roll around, and they're going to be very, very good. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind what is going on with the Western Conference right now and how difficult this is going to be when we get into these rankings. So let's get this thing started at the bottom. The number 12 team, in my opinion, this season is going to be Colorado. I just don't like really anything about this team. They've got a new coach coming in, implementing a new system, a 3-5-2, a 3 at the back formation you don't typically see in MLS. We'll see how that goes for them. But really, what they're doing is they're taking away the one strength they had on that team, and that was their defense. And they're changing it into a 3 at the back. That better translate to more goals, because they were the worst team last year in the league in goals scored, tied with DC United. They just can't score, and I don't think that that's going to change this season. I don't see where on that team the goals are going to come from. I honestly have no idea. I mean, there's just so many question marks and so many changes with this team that was already not very good. I don't know how they make a significant leap, or if they're at all any better. So for me, I have to put them at the bottom this year. And I honestly, I'd be surprised if they finished even 1 or 2 spots above it. Coming in at number 11, I'm going to go with Minnesota United. I don't think that's any surprise. I think these two teams specifically are the bottom 2. Everyone else above this might have a shot at the playoffs, but these two teams specifically, I would be absolutely stunned if they were to make the postseason. There's just no way, in my opinion, no possible way. But I do think Minnesota is at least a little bit better than Colorado. I like at least the balance that Minnesota has, and I'm saying that knowing that they were the worst team defensively in the league last year, giving up 70 goals. That was not good. You went into every game knowing that they were going to give up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals every single game. No offense on the planet is going to be able to compensate for that. But this year, I think they're a little bit more balanced. They brought in right back Tyrone Mears to help balance that out a little bit as well. I know he's 35 years old, but he's still a solid defender in this league. The midfield looks pretty decent with Molino, Nicholson, Finley, Ibsen. Looks really, really good. Moving forward, I'm not too sure about where the creativity is going to come from, but if they can get the ball up to their strikers, Christian Ramirez or Abu Danladi, they're really, really decent. So I think that this team, more so than Colorado, has a lot more balance overall. I think that they're going to be a more consistent team this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe snuck up to 9th, 8th. I don't think they get higher than that, but they might not be. They're definitely, I don't think that they're the worst team in the league this year. I think that's definitely Colorado, but still not a playoff team in Minnesota. Coming in at number 10, I have San Jose. And yes, I know that they were a playoff team last year, but ask anyone, and no one can tell you how that actually happened. That was not a playoff team. They had no business being in the playoffs, yet somehow they got in. I have no explanation for how that actually happened. They finished with a -21 goal difference last year, which was 3rd worst in the Western Conference, which is where I have them finishing this season, because I don't think they've upgraded really anywhere at all. They got a new coach in, so that means another new system, a lot of turnover happening. It's a bit of a question mark. This whole team really, really is. If everything comes together, maybe they're sort of a contender, maybe sliding into that last playoff spot again, but I honestly don't see that happening. They scored fewer goals and gave up more goals than any team that made the playoffs last season. They're not a playoff team, and I don't expect them to be there this year. Now, those 3 teams that we just named off, Colorado, Minnesota, San Jose, for me, there's a line between those 3 teams and the other 9 teams in the Western Conference. Honestly, any of these teams could make the playoffs. There's just so many question marks in the West, and we'll get to those for each team. It's very, very difficult to predict, but For me, at number 9 here, I'm going to go with the Vancouver Whitecaps. And they lost Freddie Montero, their striker, and they replaced him with Kei Kamara, which is actually, for what I saw from that team last year, that's a decent pull. I think that's actually an upgrade for the way that that team plays. I think for me, that's an example of going out and getting the right player for your team. A stronger guy, a bigger guy that can bring balls down and hold it up and allow the team to come forward and play off of that. Freddie Montero is not that type of player, and that's how they try to use him, especially in the playoffs against Seattle. They had no offense, nothing going forward. And with creative players like Alphonso Davies, Jordi Reyna, and Christian Teixeira on that team, I don't understand why they couldn't use those players a little bit more effectively. So if those three specifically take the next step forward in their career and become better players and more involved in the offense, they can rely on that a little bit more, this team could be a playoff team. I still like their defense. I still think that they could get it done. The talent is there. They just have to put it all together. At number 8, we have the true wild card heading into this season, and that is the new LAFC team. And I actually like this team a lot. I don't think you could really expect them to be as good as Atlanta was in their first season last year, but I don't think that they're also going to be as bad as Minnesota was. I think that they're somewhere in between, actually. They've done a really, really good job building this team up for their first season. I mean, Marcos Urania up top, that's a decent striker to start out with. The midfield looks really, really good with Diego Rossi, Benny Feilhaber, Carlos Vela, Latif Blessing. It's solid in the midfield, and then they built that defense beautifully. Jordan Harvey, Lawrence Simon, Walker Zimmerman, Steven Beitashour, proven MLS defenders, great defenders at that, I think. And they back it up with a couple of decent goalkeeping options in Luis Lopez and Ty Miller, which I can tell you from personal experience watching Ty Miller in Seattle, he deserves to be a starter in this league. He is that good, and I would expect him to win that job eventually this season. It's a solid team. What they lack is depth. There really isn't much to speak of there. So if they pick up injuries, especially in a couple of key spots, they are really going to struggle. But initially, on paper, they look really, really good. The other question mark with this team, though, is we've never seen them play. Are they going to fit together? Can they make it all come together? We just don't know. Like I said, though, I think that they won't be quite as good as Atlanta, but not as bad as Minnesota, and they could possibly be a playoff team this year. We just have to wait and see. In the number 7 spot, and this one was really, really difficult, the team that just misses out on the playoffs, I have Houston here. Although I really want to put them higher, there's a big question mark, and it comes with how young of a team they have, specifically in the attack. They lost starting striker Cubo Torres, but for me, that's actually not as big of a loss as some people are making that out to be. They're replacing him with Mauro Manotas, who I think has a higher ceiling and could be a really, really good player in this league. He just has to continue that development, and if he can become that player, they should be fine. They probably will be a playoff team once again. They added pieces to the defense, added goalkeeper Chris Seitz as well. I like this team on paper. It looks really, really good, but they are still a very young team. So we'll see what happens. With youth comes inconsistency sometimes. That could jump up and bite them, but I wouldn't be at all shocked if they made the playoffs again. Coming in at number 6, I'm going to put FC Dallas, and this is the real debate for me. My head is telling me to put Houston here. My gut tells me to go with Dallas, so I'm going to go with Dallas just because on paper, I think that they have a little bit more of a proven team. Last year, everyone thought that they were going to be a top team in the West. It didn't come together for them, and then they almost panicked and just self-destructed and sold a couple of players. I'm going to bank on the fact that they're not going to do that. If that does happen, blow this whole thing out of the water. Dallas isn't a playoff team. But if they keep the team together and they play the way that they should and that they're supposed to, and they don't pick up those key injuries like they did last season, this should be a playoff team. But that is a lot of ifs associated with it. So I'm going to put Dallas here. I like the team a lot. Barrios, Diaz, Kellen Acosta, Max Urruti. They have the attack. The defense took a little bit of a hit when they lost Walker Zimmerman, but it's still pretty strong. A good goalkeeper in Jesse Gonzalez. To me, this does look like a playoff team if it all holds together, but that is a very big if. Moving up to number 5, I'm going with Sporting Kansas City, which is exactly where they finished last season. They always have one of, if not the best defense in the MLS. I don't see that changing this season. If anything, they're a little bit better defensively. But it all comes down to that offense. They had one of the worst offenses in the league last season. They have to be able to score goals, and that is why they're not successful in the playoffs. They're always there. They're always in the playoffs. They just don't get very far because when they fall behind, they don't have a way to dig themselves out. This offense is a little bit revamped, a little bit reworked. They brought in some decent players. Kyrie Shelton from NYCFC, I think he could develop into a good player if given the chance. They also brought in Felipe Gutierrez to replace Benny Feilhaber. I think he could be a really good fit on this team as well. So if they are able to take at least a small step forward, they could become a really, really dangerous team in the Western Conference. Regardless of what happens with that offense, though, they should be in the playoffs given that defense. I don't think there's any way that they don't make it, but if they could just develop a little bit of offensive firepower, they could be a really good team. Coming in the number 4 spot, I'm going to go with the Portland Timbers. They finished last season as the number 1 team in the Western Conference, but they do have questions of their own headed into this season. The biggest of which is how they're going to play under their new head coach. Gone is longtime coach Caleb Porter, and that could be a big problem. For me, I thought Caleb Porter was one of the main reasons why they were so good for so long. Even when it looked like their backs were against the wall and everything was going to fall apart, they kept it together, and they were still constantly and consistently a competitive team. Without that kind of influence in the locker room, we'll see what happens with this team. Also, Fernando Adi, always linked with rumors going out of the MLS, like he's going to be leaving. If he stays, they should be fine. As long as Adi and reigning MVP Diego Valeri are on the field, everything will be fine. Portland will score goals, and they'll be a good team once again. But if any of those factors breaks down a little bit, this team could be in trouble. At number 3, we have the LA Galaxy, who finished last place in the West last season, after I picked them to finish first. You know, that happened. That happened. But you know what? I think it was an anomaly. I think it was an absolute fluke. Everything went wrong last season with LA. Everything went wrong. That team was not well put together. Lost head coach Bruce Arenas. That team was doomed from the start. They actually won more games on the road last season than they won at home, which can't remember a time when the LA Galaxy had that happen. They are almost unbeatable every season at home. They won 3 games last year. 3 at home. Like, there's no explanation for why that team was as bad as it was, but they have addressed things, and I think this team is in a lot better position going into this season. They went out and got a true number 9 goal scorer in Ola Kamara. That was huge. That was the number 1 thing. They had to do that to kind of settle everything else down in the rest of the team. That allows Giovanni Dos Santos to drop back into more of a midfield creative role instead of a goal scorer role, which he was never suited to do. I think that's going to help the team a lot. They'll get Sebastian Lletget back as well, pair him with Roman Alessandrini on the other side. That's a strong attacking winger duo. And then Jonathan Dos Santos and new addition Perry Kitchen coming back to MLS. That's a great looking midfield. On paper, that is an LA Galaxy team right there. The star power everywhere. Looks like it should all fit together as it should. They addressed the defense, which was the 2nd worst defense in the league last year as well, and got a new goalkeeper, and a good one at that, in David Bingham. So I think they went out and addressed every position they needed to address and got, I think, the right players in the right positions, which is super, super important. I always say it's not about going out and getting great players. You need the right players. And I think they got the right players, and they just happen to have name recognition with them as well. I think this team is poised for big things in the upcoming season. In the number 2 spot, and this might be the surprise pick here, it's going to be Real Salt Lake. They just narrowly missed out on the playoffs last season, falling 1 point short. And if they had made the playoffs, if they had just found a way to squeak in there, they were the hottest team. They would have been the hottest team going into the playoffs. They would have been very, very dangerous. I'm not sure anyone would have been able to knock them out. And they bring back largely the same team that they finished last season with. So I expect the same sort of results. The same team that ended last season should be coming back, and they should be playing up to the same standard. Defense is where they struggled last season, and they didn't do a whole lot to address that, but they played better down the stretch. They'll be a year older. They're still largely a young group back there, but players like Justin Glad, Danny Acosta. I mean, they're going to continue to develop and become stronger players. That midfield looks superb, at least on paper. João Plata, Jefferson Savarino, Kyle Beckerman, Albert Rusnak. It looks so, so good. So if they can keep it together and play like they did last year to end the season, they will be fine. They will definitely be a playoff team. And if they take a step forward and get better, they could be a true contender in the West. And now we have arrived at the #1 spot, and you can criticize me for this if you want to, as I sit here in my Sounders gear, being a Sounders fan, but I'm putting them at the #1 spot, and really, can you blame me? They've been to back-to-back MLS Cup finals. They're one of the most consistent teams in the league and have been over the last 2 or 3 seasons, and they have one of the best, if not the best, front offices in the MLS. Once again, it's not just about getting good quality players, but getting the right players for the team. And this front office knows how to get that done. 2 great examples of that. In the last 2 seasons, they've gotten at least one player that has really solved a big problem or changed the entire dynamic of the team. 2 years ago, they struggled in the attack, looking like they were heading for a last place finish. They went out, got Nico Lodeiro, changed that entire team around with that acquisition, and went on to win the MLS Cup. Last year, struggled defensively, specifically at right back, went out, got Kelvin Leerdam, and from that point forward, one of the best defenses in the league. That front office is next level. That is a great, great front office there. And yes, they have question marks of their own. A lot of people talking about Jordan Morris now missing the entire season with that ACL injury. But honestly, last year, Jordan Morris, by all standards, had an awful season. Didn't score many goals. When he was there, wasn't very effective. Then he missed nearly the entire playoffs with an injury anyway. Barely made an impact there. So I don't think that's as big of a loss as people are making that out to be. I think the team is still great without him. I thought he might be poised for a huge breakout season. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. With him, I think that they would have been a little bit better, but without him, I don't think that they're any worse than they were last season anyway. The other question mark is replacing the production that they lost with the loss of Jovan Jones on that left-hand side. But with Victor Rodriguez now poised to probably be the starter there, when he played last season, he was absolutely fantastic. He just didn't get enough consistent playing time due to a couple of small injuries, and then also he missed quite a bit of time with the birth of his daughter. I think he had to go back to Spain for that. So with him playing consistently in there, that should be fine. I don't see any drop off there. The team just looks really, really solid. The only other question maybe they had was at center back, lacking a little bit of depth. But yesterday they went out and signed a new center back in Kim Ki-hee from South Korea. Looks like a decent player by all accounts. So that solves that problem as well. There's no holes in this team. And I think there aren't very many teams in the Western Conference you can say that about. So for me, they have to be the #1 team. So there it is. Those are my predictions for the Western Conference for this season. Am I confident in those playoff teams, that top 6? Not so much. No, not really. No. I mean, it's a league that's built on parity where no team should be at the top for too long and no team should be at the bottom for too long. And no team epitomized that better than the LA Galaxy last season. You just never know what's going to happen. You never know. Some injuries might creep up and really kill a team off, or some player might develop into some superstar that you never saw coming. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. Specifically, who do you think is going to be a playoff team this season? Let me know your 1 through 6, your playoff teams in the Western Conference. So that's it for this one. If you did enjoy it, make sure to let me know by leaving a like below. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you when we come back for some more Major League 90. See ya.